There's a lot going on in the MMA world right now. A lot going on in combat sports right now. 4 of the biggest fights of the year just got announced in the past couple weeks. You've got Canelo Crawford, Makhachev Della Maddalena, Khamzat Duplessis, Topuria Oliveira. But instead of any of that, we're going to be talking about UFC Vegas 106. We're going to do our full card predictions. This is Burns versus Morales. Start with the early prelims, go into the main card. Let's get right into it. Starting with a banger, the one everyone's been looking forward to. A lot of people are talking about Khamzat versus Duplessis and Topuria versus Makhachev, but everyone was thinking about Tecia Pennington versus Luana Pinheiro. Whatever. I'll make this quick. Shitty card. First fight, like I said, Tecia Pennington versus Luana Pinheiro. I'm picking Tecia Pennington. She should be on a 5-fight winning streak, arguably. She hasn't fought anyone that good, really. But she did retire Carla Esparza. She beat Mackenzie Dern pretty clearly and got robbed. I think she won clearly rounds 1 and 2. There was one round where she had her back taken for a lot of it, and she lost that one, but the other 2 rounds she pretty clearly won. She beat Tabitha Ritchie and lost a decision, but that's happened before. It's not Tabitha Ritchie's first robbery. And then Luana Pinheiro was just pretty shit, had a pretty bad run. Tecia Pennington should arguably be on a 5-fight winning streak, and Pinheiro should arguably be on a 4-fight losing streak. She's lost her last 3 to Robertson, Angela Hill, and Hebas, all of whom I think, other than Robertson, I think both Hill and Hebas are coming off of losses since then. And then she not pretty clearly, but she lost to Michelle Watterson, in my opinion, and I think a lot of people's opinions, in a pretty close fight. So I'm going to pick Tecia Pennington to win this fight, just by being better. This is a fun fact about this fight. I was looking at the odds on DraftKings, and I think they made an error. This isn't a joke. She was minus 400 to win, and she was minus 500 to win by decision. So, according to DraftKings, she was more likely to win by a decision than win the fight at all, which is interesting. It's probably been fixed by now, but I'm going to pick Tecia Pennington to win, probably by decision, and I'm also not going to watch this fight. So, next fight up the card, Hyun-Sung Park versus Carlos Hernandez. This is an interesting fight. We don't really know how good Hyun-Sung Park is. Obviously, 9-0, pretty new to the sport in the grand scheme of things. But he's got, one fight in the UFC. I guess kind of 2. It's kind of like, all of the road to UFC finals, where it's like it was during a UFC event. It was under the UFC banner, but they technically weren't signed to the UFC yet, and the guy he beat isn't a UFC fighter. So he's 1-0 in the UFC, 2-0 on UFC events, and I think 4-0 under the UFC banner. So, not bad. Carlos Hernandez, not exactly had the best run in his career, coming off of a win to Namirgal Tumendembro, who I really like. I watched, I think, all of his fights before his UFC debut. Had a couple fights canceled. I was a big fan of him. But he's not the best fighter in the world. He's got some clear holes in his game. And, as a flyweight, if you have a couple holes in your game, you might get exposed. The thing about Carlos Hernandez is that he's good, but it's flyweight, so you either got to be really technically good, have a really good, dimension to your game, like Makayev or, Pantoja, who are really good at, submission grapplers, or you've got to be really chaotic and just willing to go out there and throw everything you got. He's got none of that, so he's never going to be really at the top of the sport. Tumendembro, who we fought before, did have that chaos, and he was actually a pretty good finisher. But Carlos Hernandez just got the better of a couple of exchanges and won a pretty close fight. I think a split decision. He's got the ability to beat some of these lower level flyweights. But I think that Hyun-Sung Park has the finishing potential, and he has the chaos to go out there and find a finish. So I'm going to pick him to win. And I don't know if he's going to get a finish, but he also has finishing ability at flyweight also kind of means an ability to win rounds by knocking your opponent down or doing damage. So I think he could very easily win by decision. We'll finish. So, yeah. Next fight up the card, Denise Gomes versus Elise Reed. You heard me right. It's Denise Gomes, not Denise Gomez. Someone needs to teach Brazilians how to pronounce their names. But, Denise Gomez, I'm going to call her, oh, it's fucking Gomes, whatever. I'm going to call her Denise. She's pretty decent at fighting. I think she's a little overrated. I don't think she's that good. And she's gotten a bit of hype recently. She's a minus 500 favorite in this fight. But, she did just go to a decision with Karolina Kowalkiewicz, who's one of the worst fighters in the strawweight division. She went to a split decision with Eduardo Mora, who's not that good. She's gone on to beat Veronica Hardy by a pretty close decision. I think that was a split too, which isn't the most impressive. And she did lose to Angela Hill, who is pretty over the hill, pretty washed. But she did knock out Yasmin Uregui, who I think is one of the better fighters, maybe top 5 skill-wise in the strawweight division. But so that kind of shows you, even if she's the worst fighter, she has finishing potential. So I don't know if she should be minus 500. She might be worse skill-wise than Elise Reed. But she is, a big lesbian. She's not that big. She's 5'2", but she's a powerful, masculine, lesbian Brazilian woman. And that's basically the formula to be pretty decent at fighting in the UFC. And Elise Reed just isn't that good. Lost to Lupita Godinez, who is pretty solid. But not the best in the world. And then also lost to someone else, Loma Lookboom. She got submitted by Loma Lookboom a couple years ago. I think that was Loma Lookboom's last or second last fight before her long layoff. But Loma Lookboom, she looked good in the grappling in her last fight, but before her layoff, I never really thought of her as that good of a grappler. And getting finished by her, especially in the grappling, not a very good look. She's a pretty traditional Muay Thai, neck Muay, light on the lead leg. Keeps to the lead leg, shit like that. So, getting submitted by her isn't a very good look. So I'm going to pick Denise Gomes. I'm not going to think a ton about it. She's probably just more likely to get a finish, more likely to hold her down and win a boring decision, more likely to, have better moments of feet. So, in most of the ways that MMA fights go, I think she has an advantage. So, next fight up the card, Luana Santos versus Tainara Lisboa. I think both of these fighters are not very good. They have a similar record. 8-2 versus 7-2. It's just Santos is a little bit bigger. Not really. She's not bigger. She's actually a little bit smaller. But she is significantly younger. And I think she's had better competition in her career. I think Casey O'Neill is better than every single person Tainara Lisboa has fought, other than fighting a debuting Norma Jamont in her professional debut. So as a 0-0 fighter, she fought 0-0 Norma Jamont and lost. But everyone else she's fought in her early career is kind of a bum. And I actually think Norma Jamont was kind of shit early in her career. So I don't really love that win. I kind of want Lisboa to win because Luana Santos did have that video of her making out with her dog or some shit like that. Or was she jerked? She was either uncomfortably touching her dog or she was making out with it. There's one or the other. She was doing an Israel Adesanya. I remember a lot of people giving a shit about it on Twitter. So maybe not a role model that we want in the bantamweight. She's bantamweight? I feel like both these girls are pretty small. Surprised this fight's at bantamweight. But yeah, I'll pick Santos to win. I've seen more of her, and I think she's probably slightly better. I don't know. Next fight up the card, Conor Matthews versus Yadier Del Valle. Del Valle's pretty solid. I don't know if he's the best in the world, but he looked really good in his fight in the Contender Series. He's had decent competition on the come up, 8-0. Conor Matthews, he's one of the New England Cartel guys. He's just not that good. I'm not going to think too much about this. I'm going to pick Del Valle to win, maybe by finish, maybe by decision. I don't really know. He looked good on the feet. He looked he looked good enough on the feet in that Contender Series fight, and he had a good enough gas tank that I'm this guy's probably a well-trained MMA fighter. He's not going to have a huge hole in his game. So I don't know. I don't know a ton about him as far as how good he'll be in the future. But if he has a really good performance in this fight and gets a finish early, or has a master class 30-26 decision or something like that, maybe he'll be good. But I feel like I've seen enough out of him to pick him over Conor Matthews, who I don't think is that good. Next fight of the card, interesting fight, even odds. Jared Gordon versus Thiago Moises. Thiago Moises is one of those guys where it's I feel like he either fights a really good fighter and has a decent fight with them and keeps it close, or he fights a bum and pretty easily beats them. In his last 5, he's win, loss, win, loss, win. So he's on, he's lined up for a loss. And I think Jared Gordon's actually pretty solid. He's been screwed over in 3 of his last 4 fights. He got robbed by Paddy Pimblett. I think most people agree. I know Paddy Pimblett did break his foot in the first round, but Paddy Pimblett has gone on to have much better performances, especially in his last fight. And I think Jared Gordon has also shown he's pretty good. He was beating Bobby Green in the first round before Bobby Green went left way mode and just headbutted him and knocked him out. And that fight was called a no contest. Looked good against Mark Madsen. Mark Madsen's not a very good fighter, but he's a pretty good grappler and didn't really have a lot of success in the grappling. So, that might show a pretty good sign against Moises, who's a pretty good grappler. And then in his last fight, I think he pretty clearly beat Nasrat Haqparast, who, decent fighter. That was a kind of a robbery. And Nasrat went on to beat, Esteban Ribovic in his last fight a couple months ago. And I think Ribovic is actually pretty solid. So, yeah, Jared Gordon, 4 pretty good performances. He got screwed over in 3 of them. Beat Leonardo Santos before that. That's like a Thiago Moises level of opponent. So I'm not going to rate it a ton. Moises coming off of a win against Troy Ogden isn't that good. His last win before that was against Mitch Ramirez, leg kick TKO. He looked good in that fight, but Mitch Ramirez is one of those guys who's not that good. I don't really rate a win against him, so I'm not going to, take that to the bank. Got pretty easily styled on by Benoit Saint-Denis, lost to Ludovic Klein in his last loss. I'm going to pick Jared Gordon to win. I just think he's a little bit more proven. He's had good performances against good fighters. I know Moises has too, but when Jared Gordon has a good performance against a pretty decent fighter, I think he wins. And when Moises has a pretty good or a decent performance against a good fighter, like his fight with Islam or, Ludovic Klein, I think he pretty clearly loses. So, yeah, I'm going to pick Jared Gordon. A little bit older, maybe he's a little washed. I just think he's got an advantage on the feet, and he's been in the game long enough where he's not going to have a glaring hole like Mitch Ramirez, who doesn't check low kicks, or an inability to, get up if he gets taken down or get handedly out grappled. So I'll pick Jared Gordon to get it down. Next fight up the card. I don't know why this fight is above the last one, but it's Matheus Camilo versus Gabe Green. Matheus Camilo, decent prospect out of Brazil. He beat Darabshak Nabotov, who's a Russian Tajikistani decent prospect who's 8-0 going into their fight. And he actually looked pretty good in that one. That's the only fight of his I've seen. And then Gabe Green got knocked out by Brian Battle 2 years ago, and he's coming back down from welterweight to lightweight, which I don't love for his chin. If you're gonna get chinned by Brian Battle in 14 seconds in the first exchange of the fight, your chin might get significantly worse if you go down to lightweight. And I think that Gabe Green, just based on the pictures I've seen of him, was pretty juiced up early in his career. So maybe he's shrinking down with the muscle a ton, and he might not have a really bad weight cut. But I don't love that. Also, Gabe Green's one of those guys, kind of like Moises, but a little bit more extreme, where he's only lost to good fighters, clearly, or beaten bad fighters clearly. So it's you don't really know where he is. I think his best win in the UFC is Johan Lunes, who was undefeated at the time, but has gone on to be proven as not a very good fighter, at least for the UFC standard. And his worst loss is not Yadier. Yadier's top 5. A prime D-Rod. So he's somewhere between prime D-Rod and Johan Lunes, which is honestly most of the welterweight division. So we know he's somewhere between there. I'm going to guess Matheus Camilo is a little better. Gabe Green could be pretty washed. He hasn't fought in 2 years. And I could see someone who hasn't fought in 2 years and got finished, early in his last fight, just dropping the first round from ring rust, and then he has to go on and win the next 2 rounds or get a finish. And I don't love him to do that, especially with a bigger weight cut, coming down a weight class. Maybe he gasps him in the 3rd. So I think this could be a very clear 29-28. Gabe Green's the better fighter in the 2nd round, but he lost the first 2 to ring rust and gassed out in the 3rd, something like that. Or Camilo's maybe way better than he's proven to be, because he's unproven, and he finishes Gabe Green pretty impressively. So I'm gonna pick Camilo. I definitely could see Gabe Green just being better, by virtue of being a little bit more proven. We at least have a range of where he is, and we don't really know what Matheus Camilo's ceiling is. And we might know that Gabe Green's is lower than Ian Gary, and lower than Prime D-Rod, and lower than Brian Battle. But yeah, I think Camilo gets it done. Next fight up the card. Onto the main card, we've got Julian Erosa versus Melquizael Costa. I'm going to pick Melquizael Costa. I feel like he's going to be a big favorite. I think a lot of people are going to pick him. Julian Erosa, beat Darren Elkins in his last fight, but just didn't have the most impressive performance. He finished him in the first round, obviously, but Elkins looked really, really bad in their fight. He got hit by like a jab or like a... It was hard to see if he got rocked or not, but he went down like right away to something. Then he just got kind of beaten up and finished by Erosa. Didn't look very good. It was one of those fights where you see Elkins lose and you're like, how on earth is he coming off of 2 wins? And then you see he fought like Daniel Pineda and went to decision, and you're like, oh, that's how. Let's see, what else is... Erosa did submit C-Rod, and I know Melquizael Costa didn't finish C-Rod, but a lot of Erosa's like better wins are like, oh, that was kind of a fluke. Kind of like, we'll talk about that with Paul Craig in a second, but like submitting Ricardo Ramos and submitting C-Rod with like just like a tight guillotine, that doesn't say you're a better fighter than them. And I think C-Rod's actually pretty solid, for being like a bloated bantamweight up at featherweight. And I really liked Melquizael Costa's performance against him. He looked really good in the grappling, looked really good in the clinch, against a guy who has caused major problems for really good prospects. And I think Costa's looked really improved, most importantly, in his last few. He lost to T. Garcia, got finished, I think, in the first round. But coming off of 3 wins, he beat Shaylin Nurulton, I think in a pretty impressive way. And then went on to beat Andre Feely, and then a month later come back and beat C-Rod. And then he's coming back another month later to fight Erosa. I know Erosa's also taking this fight after a pretty recent win. But I just think the momentum of Costa is better. I think he's looked more impressive, like all around recently. Like other than the Elkins fight, Erosa has looked like, oh, he got a good guillotine against C-Rod, but he didn't really show a tone in that fight. And oh, he got a good guillotine against Ricardo Ramos, but he didn't really show a lot in that fight. And other than that, like he lost to Fernando Padilla, who I don't think is that good, and got finished by Alex Caceres, who I think is not the best finisher. He's got I'm going to just look at Erosa's record, because he got a couple performances that I'm not a big fan of. I know he did get robbed by Paddy Pimblett like 10 years ago. But let's see. Decision over Hakeem Dawodu, pretty solid. Decision over Steven Peterson, split. Not very good. He did finish Charles Jourdain, but that was like another fluky front choke. Lost to Song Woo Choi. He flying kneed Nate Landwehr. Again, maybe kind of fluky. Front choked Sean Woodson, maybe kind of fluky. Head kick KO'd by Julian Arce, got out-grappled by Grant Dawson. That's not a terrible loss, but Julian Arce, not the best fighter to lose against. Got KO'd by Devontae Smith, not a very good look. And then before that, he was out of the UFC. He had a short run in the UFC before, where he lost to Teruto Ishihara, which isn't the best look. He's got a lot of like, oh, that's not the best look. I mean, he lost to fucking Artem Lolov on the Contender Series, and that was maybe in his prime. I know that was 10 years ago, but he wasn't that young. He's what? How old is he now? He's 35. He's 25 then. Maybe not in his prime, but I mean, that was after some of his better performances. Like, that was after the Paddy Pimblett fight, which is arguably his best performance. If you've seen the clip of Paddy Pimblett throwing up blood after his post-fight interview, that was after he got body kicked by Julian Erosa like 50 times. In a fight that I think Julian Erosa kind of clearly won. And I guess, okay, no, that was... His Artem Lolov fight was before that, but not that far before that. That was like a year and a half. So... I think Erosa's past his best days. A lot of his best recent performances are against shitty competition or kind of fluky. And I think Costa has a good style for beating him. Just a good all-around fighter. Erosa can't take advantage of like a huge hole. So I think Costa should get it done. I can see him getting just randomly guillotined, but as a guy who just randomly guillotined Philly like 2 months ago, I think he's good enough to get it done. All right, next fight up the card, Nurulton Ruziboev versus Dustin Soltzfus. I broke down Nurulton Ruziboev's brother's record on my Jared Cannonier versus Gregory Rodriguez prediction a couple months ago. So if you want to see how rigged his brother's record is and how rigged his record probably is, go watch that video. By the way, on that card I went 11-1, so if you just want to see a very good prediction video, go ahead and watch that. But I think Ruziboev is actually pretty decent, despite like a kind of fraudulent record. You see a lot of guys come out of Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Central Asia, Russia area, and you don't really know how good their competition has been and how legitimate the record is. And I think Ruziboev is definitely an example of that. Like, I don't know that his record is that good. And if you look at his record at welterweight versus middleweight, I think this was either before the Buckley fight or right after it. He was 6-6 at welterweight, and he was like 29 and something else at middleweight. So 29-3, something like that. And this fight is at middleweight, so I do like him to win this. He's a massive middleweight, and he was an even more massive. He's 6'5". He was 6'5" welterweight. So, and he's 6'6". Kind of crazy. But I don't think Soltzfus is that good. He kind of likes to get beat up in a bit of his fights. I would compare Ruziboev's style and explosiveness to like a first-round Abus. I don't think he's as technically good or as dangerous as Abus Magomedov or Abus whatever his name is. But he's got a similar style where he throws a lot of kicks, throws a lot of lunging punches, and he's powerful. And Dustin Soltzfus got KO'd in like 1 second versus Abus. He got front kicked and then TKO'd by punches. So I think Ruziboev could like explosively finish him in the first round. Soltzfus' best win is against Marc-Andre Barriault. And that was just a really bad performance by Barriault, who got rocked and then got in a boxing exchange and just stayed in there for too long and then got caught by a punch and got knocked out. So I'm going to pick Ruziboev to just either beat him technically in like a boring decision or just catch him with a right hand and knock him out. Next fight up the card. This one I'm really conflicted on. Sodiq Yusuff versus Mairon Santos. I feel like I was higher on Santos' performance against Francis Marshall than other people. Let me take a drink real quick. However, it wasn't that good a performance. Like, I think Francis Marshall is pretty solid. I liked his performance against Denis Buzukja. But I don't think Denis Buzukja is that good. And I think a lot of, I think Denis Buzukja was kind of unlucky in their fight. Like, a lot of more went Francis Marshall's way than Buzukja's way. Kind of like outside their control, just, zigzag luck. And it was still a split decision. And Denis Buzukja isn't that good. So I don't know how good Francis Marshall is. And Mairon Santos obviously won a very close decision that a lot of people thought he lost to Francis Marshall. But again, like, Sodiq Yusuff hasn't won in a while. I don't know. I'm going to pick Yusuff, and here's why. I think his performance against Barboza is getting kind of, maybe not overhated, but it's painting a poor light on him that I don't know if it's completely deserved. Obviously, he lost that fight in like not very impressive fashion. He won the first round by 10-8, and then he lost the next 4, almost got finished a couple times. And just like, he didn't really gas out, but he just kind of succumbed to Barboza's like superior striking. But I don't know if Mairon Santos has the technical ability of Edson Barboza, and this is a 3-round fight. So if Santos is as finishable as Barboza is in the first round, or as damageable, which we saw him get dropped by Francis Marshall in the first round, I can see him getting 10-8'd in the first round. And if the first round is a 10-8 for Sodiq Yusuff, and this is a 3-round fight, if he loses the rest of it, it's a draw. And if that Barboza fight was a 3-round fight, that's a draw because he 10-8s the first round and loses 2 and 3. So I can see Yusuff winning this. And also in a 3-round fight, Yusuff doesn't have to worry as much about gassing out. So another thing, and I think this is super important, a lot of people were talking about with the odds. They were a little concerned that maybe Yusuff had something going on outside the fight. He opened as a slight favorite, which a lot of people thought he should be a pretty big favorite, like minus 200, because of Santos' performance against Francis Marshall and his lack of like provenness in the UFC, and Yusuff's excess of provenness in the UFC. So some people are like, maybe Yusuff has something going on outside the fight. Some people think he might retire after he loses because he's got a lot of stuff going on outside of MMA. Like obviously, or maybe not obviously, but I saw him do a video with Peaks. That's kind of outside of MMA. I guess so did Lamont Roach, who went on to beat Tank Davis. But Yusuff's got a lot going on outside the UFC. So maybe people think he's going to retire. My whole point is, like, a lot of people think that Yusuff might be not so big a favorite because Vegas knows that he's got something else going on, or there's something going into this fight that they're worried about. But what I do know, I think that like I said, it's potentially true that something is going on outside of this fight for Yusuff. But I know for a fact that something is going on outside of this fight for Mairon Santos because he had this fight moved up to 155. It was supposed to be 145. He said he couldn't make the weight like a week out, and they moved it up to 55. I feel like that's a pretty big deal. Like, he, because of the weight, but he got like chinned early on in this fight. He didn't look the best at 145, and now he's having the fight moved up when he's a pretty small 45er. Not a great look. So I'm going to pick Yusuff to win this. If there's something going on outside for Yusuff, I know there's something going on for Santos too. I just think he's more proven. And I don't hate the Barbosa performance as much as I think other people do. I know he looked bad for 4 rounds, but he looked really good for 1. And if it was a 3-round fight, that's a draw. And the story's completely different. So, and this is a 3-round fight. So, all right, co-main event: Paul Craig versus Rodolfo Bellato. I mean, if Paul Craig doesn't fluke someone, he just looks horrible. That's kind of the story of his entire career. He's had a couple not fluky performances. He beat Andre Muniz at middleweight in his middleweight debut. But other than that, at middleweight, he got completely destroyed by Brendan Allen in the ground. And I don't think Brendan Allen is that good of a grappler. He got KO'd by Kyle Braujo in the first round. And then he just looked horrible against Bo Nickel, a guy who we now know has basically nothing on the feet. He has no weapons. And Paul Craig somehow still got out-techniqued by him. I know that was a terrible fight and Bo Nickel didn't look good, but neither did Paul Craig. But Paul Craig still looked worse than Bo Nickel. So I'm going to pick Bellato. I don't think Bellato's that good, and I know he's a 205er, so he's basically got no skill. But I don't think Paul Craig is going to be able to out-skill this guy and just beat him. And all Paul Craig has is shitty wrestling, good submissions off his back. I don't even think he has good submissions off the top because he's never on top because his wrestling sucks. He's got basically nothing on the feet. This is basically what I think is going to happen. He throws a lot of body kicks. I think that either he's going to get KO'd in 5 seconds by just throwing a body kick early and getting chinned on the inside, or he's going to get hurt on the feet, throw a body kick, get it caught, get taken down, and get TKO on the ground in round 2 or 3. I know Bellato he had a draw to Jimmy Crute, who is a similar one-dimensional grappler who's not very good on the feet, looks kind of shitty when he throws stuff. But Jimmy Crute actually has pretty good wrestling. I know he shot a really bad takedown in Menafield and got submitted, but his wrestling's actually pretty solid, especially before his injury. That I guess their fight was after the injury, but he looked pretty good in the wrestling. I think he beat Paul Craig before. So I'm going to pick Bellato to win this. I don't think Jimmy Crute. I don't think Paul Craig's going to be able to implement the grappling Jimmy Crute was, especially if he gets knocked out in 10 seconds. So on to the main event. I've spent too much time on this card. This card isn't that good. I'm already 26 minutes in. I'll make the main event quick. I think these are two. I want to talk about how much I didn't like Gilbert Burns. I'll say this. Before the Hamzat fight, I really didn't like Gilbert Burns because I feel like he had a ton of not that impressive performances, and people were talking about him like he's the second best welterweight in the world. He knocked out Damian Maia, and people were calling for a title shot. Bro, knocked out Damian Maia. He should get a title shot. It was in 2020. That was the COVID card with Oliveira Lee. Whatever. I liked him after the Hamzat fight. That was a cool fight, and he's had some entertaining fights since then. But I think this fight's going to be two decision guys who like to go to decision against each other, and I think because of that it's a 50-50. And I know Morales is a huge favorite, and I think that's super dumb because he hasn't looked that impressive in the UFC. He was losing to Trevin Giles before he got the finish, and he didn't look that good against Jake Matthews. But he looked decent with he's kind of like Lerone Murphy, where he just has a good game plan. He's got good technique. He's got good cardio. He's got all the basics you need to be a decent MMA fighter, and that's taken him to slightly edging out decisions throughout his career, which is kind of what Gilbert Burns has been doing with his grappling. But I think that if it's a 50-50 because of that, or maybe Morales has a slight edge if this fight is going to go to decision, I think Morales also has the finishing advantage. I don't think Burns is going to take him down, submit him, because he hasn't really done that to anyone in a while. And there's a potential that Burns is just completely washed. We don't really know how good I guess Sean Brady did have that Edwards fight, but he didn't look very good against Sean Brady, and that could be a sign that maybe he took a lot of damage against JDM, and he's just washed now. He's 38, and he could be, quickly regressing. Sometimes you see a fighter lose for the first time, like Tyron Woodley loses to Usman, and the fight where he didn't take a ton of damage, and then he's just never the same, and he's not very good. So I think Morales, if the fight, if Burns is as good as he's been, I think Morales has a slight advantage. And if Burns is any bit washed, I think he has a huge disadvantage. So I'm going to pick Morales to win by decision. Let me know if you... 80... Okay, most of the people that are picking Morales are picking him by knockout. That's kind of crazy. He's knocked out Trevin Giles, Adam Fugit, and Neil Magny. And I know Neil Magny's his best win, but Trevin Giles, Adam Fugit, he's fought other guys who are shit and didn't finish them. I don't think he's going to finish Burns, because Burns has only really been finished by Hamzat didn't finish Burns. So, again, let me know if you agree or disagree with the picks. I recorded this video yesterday and it was so bad because it was too long, and this video is like just as long as that one. But I think I got a lot more decent shit out in this one. So again, let me know if you just agree or disagree. Like the video, share the video, subscribe. Let me know what you think. Check out my previous predictions. All of those are in the same playlist as this, or they're just on my channel if you scroll back. Yeah, that's been it. Thank you for listening.